panelist, Mr. Looi Teck from the ASEAN Secretariat. Mr. Looi Teck has about 30 years of professional experience spanning private practice as well as in-house general counsel, acting amongst others as regional counsel for a AAA global banking corporation in their regional head office for the Asia Pacific region, in which his responsibilities included advising on data protection and electronic banking. With a deep interest in intellectual property, competition, and consumer protection law, public policy, economics, and technology, he has played an active role as an industry practitioner in the areas of information technology, civil and commercial practice, and journalistic publication. In his capacity as member of the Committee of the Law Society of Singapore, he was responsible for the electronic filing system of the Supreme Court of Singapore to replace paper filing for the judiciary in the late 90s. Currently, he is the head of Competition Consumer Protection and IPR Division under the Market Integration Directorate of the ASEAN Economic Community Department at the ASEAN Secretariat. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Teck.
Very good afternoon, Your Excellencies, members of the diplomatic community, representatives and heads of the Department of Justice, Executive Director, Attorney Irene D.T. Al-Logok, Director Mackie Abalos, NADRC, Director Ryan Thomas, my fellow distinguished speaker, Attorney Ruth Castello, Undersecretary, Consumer Protection Group, Department of Trade and Industry, distinguished delegates, Attorney Gwen Gricia De Vera, Board of Trustees, PDRCI. May I also acknowledge Chairman Dr. Arsenio M. Balish Sachan, Philippines Competition Commissioner. And may I also congratulate the OADR for the launch of the National ADR Convention. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to deliver a short presentation on the ASEAN Online Dispute Resolution Network. Can I have the next slide, please? First and foremost, the screen is not very clear, but if I may just share my screen. Are you able to see my screen? Okay.
Oh yes, Looi, it's clear.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So if I may, yeah, yes. Yeah, firstly, what is an ODR? As we have heard and listened since yesterday, an ODR, of course, is an online dispute resolution. It's an alternate form of dispute resolution and redress mechanism where disputes are resolved through online means. And there are, of course, various different types which ADR can have, and they range from being less automated to fully automated systems. And a very quick overview, you'll notice from the figure before that, right at the top, you have the less automated system, whereas the right at the bottom, you'll have more automated and more predictive justice type of a system. And in between, you will also notice the various forms in which online technicalities can be imposed, for example, emails and things like that. And then, of course, you also have the online mediation and video conferencing, which can take place. So why is it important that we should have an ASEAN ODR network? I think first and foremost, all 10 ASEAN member states now has established their own consumer protection laws, with Myanmar and Cambodia having got on board recently. And it is timely that we should consider developing an ODR network in the region. I will, of course, let you know afterwards where we are as far as the plan to develop such a network at the moment, because not all AMS have got an ODR system. Secondly, it is also important to develop a high level of confidence for consumer transactions in ASEAN. As we all know, transactions nowadays are not domestic, but also involves multi-jurisdictional and multi-parties who are located in different countries. And this, of course, raises issues relating to the applicable laws and which are the most appropriate forum for particular disputes which may arise to be determined. Thirdly, an ASEAN ODR network would also be important to ensure or build a higher level of confidence in the integration of the ASEAN economic community. This is particular because of the very prevalent cross-border nature of commercial transactions within the ASEAN region and also beyond. Additionally, the rise of e-commerce, which have taken place and now has become more pronounced as a result of the pandemic, have also increased the need for an ODR in ASEAN. Next. Yeah, so where are we as far as the ODR network is concerned? As far the development of the ODR network is spelled out within the ASEAN Strategic Action Plan on Consumer Protection 2016 to 2025. Now, under our strategic goal 3, we have to, one of the strategic goal 3 is to institute a high consumer confidence in the AEC, the ASEAN Economic Community, and also in cross-border commercial transactions. And one of the outcomes under our action plan is to develop an ASEAN regional online dispute resolution. At the moment, we have, and we are completing, in fact, we have just endorsed the completion of our feasibility study to develop such a network. And under the outcome 3.2, there are 3 initiatives which we have to go through in order to achieve this outcome. First, of course, under 3.2.1 is to establish a national ODR system. This, as you can see, are being undertaken in this case by the Philippines, but there are also other AMS as well, which are doing that. And I'll give some more details on this later. Next would be to establish an ASEAN ODR network. Now, to establish this ASEAN ODR network, of course, presupposes that all AMS must have an ODR system in place. Then the other issue is how do we want to crystallize and structure such a network? It is something that we'll have to consider once the ODR system has been developed locally. And thirdly, will be to establish an ASEAN mechanism for cross-border complaints and investigations. Other than Initiative 3.21 to 3.2.3, we also have developed the Initiative 3.1 on the ASEAN High-Level Principles on Consumer Protection, in which one of the principles would be to ensure that there are sufficient consumer redress mechanism available for consumer in the ASEAN landscape. Concurrently, also, we are now developing the guidelines to common approaches on ADR, which is the offline version of the dispute resolution system under Initiative 1.5.1, and this would be completed by end of this year. In the future, we will have to consider the development of reports on gaps and needs of the system as well. So what are the opportunities and challenges of an ODR network system in ASEAN? First and foremost would be the opportunities would be the accessibility and convenience of allowing consumers to be in one platform to discuss and resolve disputes related to transactions with a multi-jurisdictional perspective. Secondly, it would be efficient to enable bulk consumer claims to be processed through automation and standardization. In other words, we are targeting high volume but low value transactions to ensure that the bulk of the consumers in the region would be able to have their disputes resolved with low cost. So in other words, lower operating costs in the longer term would be an important consideration. Another opportunities in the development of the ODR network that we have identified is legal certainty and consistency of outcomes. This would also be the international trends, concurrent international trends and developments as well as ongoing on the adoption of virtual meetings and the mechanisms due to COVID-19. But of course, there are various challenges in the development of such an ODR network in ASEAN. Chief number one would be strong political commitment and initial investment in terms of human and financial resources. These are required. Without strong political willpower and political commitment, a project of this scale, which would involve all 10 AMS, would be quite difficult to take place. Secondly, there will be challenges related to data protection and security, and to ensure that there are fairness by design, to ensure that the rules of natural justice, access to counsel, and also to ensure a fair and expedient outcome can take place so that it will not be protracted. Third challenges, of course, will be the internet connectivity within the AMS. As we know, not all AMS are equally endowed in terms of the internet connectivity infrastructure. So there is a need to build upon this even as we have the long-term view of developing ODR. The other challenges, of course, would be identify what are the suitable and specific types of disputes that ought to be referred to for the purposes of the ODR, online ODR. And there's a need also to ensure that there are assistance or facilitation to consider consumer skills, as well as case-specific or contextual information. Finally, the other challenges would be, of course, checks and balances. How do we ensure that there's sufficient accountability, checks and balances in the system to ensure that a fair outcome will take place? Next. So what is the current objective of an ODR system in ASEAN at this point in time? Where are we right now? At the moment, we are basically in a shifting the existing modes of dispute resolution to an ODR. Basically, what this means is you notice the traditional modes of dispute resolutions with the usage of hotlines, formal letters, walk-in, tribunal and courts and non-litigation bodies, ADR and mediation are slowly being converted into online modes of dispute resolutions. This would include email exchange, teleconference, e-courts, complaints, other consultations, mediation. Now, in a very quick nutshell, a simplified overview of a dispute resolution process would be as follows. The complaint lodging filing, disputing parties to agree upon settlement method, then direct settlement or third-party facilitation, whether settlement are reached, and after that, the termination of the complaint or the escalation to a higher process, or it goes back to the settlement method, an alternative method to reconsider the process again. Basically, any of these stages here can be converted into an online process. So the simplified overview of the dispute resolution process basically shows that every phase of the dispute resolution process can be converted into an online, depending on the availability of the technical system that's available. Now, what are the design criteria for the ODR network in ASEAN? There are, of course, various items which you need to consider. Firstly, what are the purpose and scope? In considering what are the purpose and scope, issues of whether it should be a one-stop database for consumers' complaints, specific types of transactions, interoperability across systems and sectors, who are the users, neutral third parties, legal requirements and procedures, standard processing time, referral mechanism, and data protection would be issues that would need to be considered. The degree of automation, the automated screening or negotiation tools could be implemented within the system. And then the issue about administration and accountability. Administration accountability, of course, the issue of who's going to have centralized management and monitoring within the system. So in other words, the design criteria for the ODR networks in ASEAN is dependent on the availability of resources, the policy objective, and of course, technical ability and infrastructure to ensure that these criteria could be met and be developed. So what's the minimum design criteria for a successful ODR network in ASEAN? Firstly, there have to be a degree of interoperability between the different systems, whether online and offline. In other words, the various systems within the ASEAN must be compatible from an IT perspective, and they should be able to operate from an interoperability basis. Secondly, transparency and access to information about the availability of options, applicable law, standard processing time in each AMS. There should be informed consent and choice for consumer participation, example, recourse through mediation and versus litigation. Reasonable cost, time limits, and convenient location to strengthen the position of consumers vis-a-vis businesses. Right to representation if consumers require legal counsel. The important point here to note is legal cost should never exceed the amount or value of the dispute subject matter. Fairness and impartiality during the ODR process, making sure that the third neutral party are well qualified to determine, adjudicate, and to mediate. And we must have an independent administrator. Consensus-based outcomes or other avenues to seek redress. And the accountability of the system. That means regular review system must be available to ensure these as the minimum design criteria for a successful ODR network in ASEAN. Basically, these are the best practices that we'll be looking into in order to develop a effective, efficient, and equitable ODR network in ASEAN. So what does the ASEAN ODR network seeks to achieve? Basically, to convert all the traditional offline modes of dispute resolution, including non-litigation based channels, into online mechanism. Secondly, of course, to determine whether or not the available mechanisms could be made for specific sectors, such as finance, food, safety, tourism, and of course, it should also apply to all businesses and consumer associations. Additionally, the ODR network for ASEAN would probably utilize as well the ASAPCP website, and also to ensure that the interoperability requirements is met. In a nutshell, if you have a look at the flow chart of the regional ASEAN ODR network, you'll see three colors here with the subnational component right at the bottom. Subnational component, of course, involve all the various parties here, tribunal, courts, consumer association, and districts. And you'll see two colored versions, yellow and white. White would be the offline version of the ADR, and the yellow is the online one, which have to be converted concurrently. And the national, which is in orange, likewise too, would be converting their offline into online version. And at the regional cross-border section, cross-border ASEAN ODR network, you see this this network here, where we'll be having contact between the ASEAN focal points through our website and liaising with all the relevant individual agencies, and using this as a platform where it could interface, so that it could interface and so deal with the issues involving multi-jurisdictional transactions. What are the existing ODR mechanisms in ASEAN? Right now in Thailand, there's a pilot project which is being done, carried out by the Office of the Consumer Protection Board called dMediate. It's an online mediation platform where virtual meetings are held between the consumer and business with OCPB as mediator. And they focus mainly on automotive, but will expand to other industries depending on the performance of the pilot project. It can be seen at this website, and they currently use the Thai language. The other ODR which are being planned in other AMS would include Indonesia, uniform complaints procedure linked with e-commerce platforms. Cases were closely monitored and forwarded to local dispute. The Philippines, which is happening right now, even as we speak, under the Department of Trade and Industry, and also under the able leadership of Yusek Ruf Castello, shifting from the manual and email referral system and real-time tracking of complaints. And Vietnam, of course, to track the progress online regardless of their location in the country. System is set to be basis for a more sophisticated ODR system in the future. So what will we do for the ASEAN ODR network? Firstly, we'll have to agree on a common vision of an ASEAN ODR network. We need to develop an action plan with the milestones based on that vision, and then define common minimum standards or principles for future compatibility. This could also be linked to the new implementation schedule of the ASEAN Strategic Action Plan. And with that, thank you very much for your kind attention.